You better marry that girl, Matt.
Yeah, I think I will. When are you going to stop telling people what to do?
He was the face of American heroism, the cowboy every generation admired. But behind the camera, John Wayne held grudges, deep ones. Before his death, the Duke revealed the 5 people he absolutely couldn't stand. And some of the names will leave you stunned. Who made the list? And what did they do to earn his lifelong hatred? Let's find out. The Duke had enemies? John Wayne, the ultimate American cowboy, was a symbol of grit, honor, and rugged patriotism. His towering presence, gravelly voice, and strong jawline became synonymous with justice, bravery, and old-fashioned American values. Generations grew up watching him tame the Wild West, outshoot the villains, and walk off into the sunset with a calm swagger. But off the screen, life was not always so simple. Behind the camera, Wayne was a complicated man with strong opinions and a no-nonsense attitude. He didn't sugarcoat his views, and he wasn't afraid to speak his mind, even if it meant stirring controversy. And when it came to certain individuals, the Duke made no effort to hide his disdain. These weren't small disagreements or fleeting tensions. These were deep-rooted rivalries, public feuds, and lasting grudges. While the world admired him as a legend, John Wayne quietly kept a list of people he simply couldn't stand. Some were fellow stars who shared the spotlight. Others were rising names in a changing Hollywood he didn't quite agree with. And then there were those who clashed with his worldview, challenging everything he believed in. Some names will shock you. After all, it's hard to imagine the Duke getting into shouting matches or penning angry letters. But make no mistake, he had his share of enemies. Whether it was a bitter feud sparked by a rejected film script or a personal betrayal that ended a close friendship, Wayne was not one to forgive easily. Before his death, he had already made it clear who had earned a spot on that personal blacklist. And it wasn't just about ego or pride. To Wayne, these conflicts were about principle. He saw the world in black and white, right and wrong, patriotism and disrespect. And if someone fell on the wrong side of that line, there was no going back. In some cases, these disputes were public and explosive. In others, they festered quietly behind closed doors. But whether through sharp words, silent treatment, or outright confrontation, Wayne let it be known who he wanted nothing to do with. Some of them were legendary actors. Others were groundbreaking directors. A few may surprise you completely. But one thing is certain. These were not passing grudges. They were deeply personal and, in some cases, lifelong. So who exactly made the Duke's blacklist? And what did they do to land there? Let's take a closer look at the people John Wayne couldn't stand. The 5 most notorious names that will truly catch you off guard. Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood is one of the most iconic faces in Western film history. With his steely glare, tight-lipped delivery, and silent strength, Eastwood redefined what it meant to be a cowboy on screen. But while audiences loved his gritty style, one man was far from impressed. That man was John Wayne. Wayne had spent decades building the classic image of a Western hero. He stood for honor, courage, and a strict moral code. In every film, he played the good guy who made tough choices and fought for justice. His heroes were flawed, but always noble. Then came Clint Eastwood, a younger actor whose characters didn't always follow the rules. His gunslingers were cold, sometimes cruel, and often operated in moral gray zones. This new brand of Western didn't sit well with Wayne. The clash between these two titans wasn't just about age or style. It was about values. Wayne believed the Western was more than just entertainment. It was a reflection of American ideals, a tribute to the courage and integrity of frontier life. Eastwood, on the other hand, brought a more cynical and realistic tone to the genre. His characters blurred the line between right and wrong. That was something Wayne couldn't accept. The tension between them started when Wayne turned down the lead role in Dirty Harry. The film told the story of a hard-edged cop who didn't always follow the law to deliver justice. Wayne read the script and was disturbed by its tone. He refused the role, believing it glorified violence and celebrated a kind of hero he considered dangerous. That role would go to Eastwood, who made it one of his most famous performances. Wayne's decision haunted him. The film was a massive hit and helped cement Eastwood's place as a star. But what really lit the fuse was Eastwood's continued rise. He wasn't just acting in westerns, he was redefining them. Wayne didn't just dislike Dirty Harry, he hated what it stood for. In his eyes, Eastwood was reshaping the cowboy image into something brutal and dishonorable. At one point, Eastwood reached out to Wayne in hopes of a collaboration. He sent him a script for a western called The Hostiles. The film would have starred both men in a tense and dramatic story set in the West. It was a golden opportunity. Fans would have gone wild to see the two biggest cowboy stars share the screen. But Wayne wasn't interested. In fact, he was offended. He didn't just reject the script, he wrote Eastwood a scathing letter criticizing the story and accusing him of celebrating violence and moral confusion. According to reports, Wayne didn't hold back. He called the script trash and accused Eastwood of disrespecting the Western genre. Wayne believed the story lacked honor and portrayed cowboys in a negative light. It wasn't just a difference of opinion, it was a complete rejection of Eastwood's vision. Eastwood, ever the professional, didn't lash out. Instead, he continued trying to bridge the gap. He sent Wayne more scripts, hoping to find common ground. But Wayne never responded positively. In one case, he allegedly threw the script into the ocean, calling it a piece of garbage. Their personal relationship never truly developed. While they may have met in Hollywood circles or crossed paths at events, there was never a bond. Wayne saw Eastwood as the face of a new kind of Hollywood, one he didn't trust or respect. Eastwood, in turn, never spoke poorly of Wayne in public, but made it clear that their paths would never align. The most frustrating part for fans is the missed opportunity. A film with both men could have been a cinematic milestone. Two legends facing off in a battle of old school versus new school. But Wayne's convictions were too strong. He could not bring himself to work alongside someone who challenged everything he believed the cowboy should be. Eastwood went on to become a legend in his own right. He directed and starred in award-winning films and helped shape the modern Western. Wayne remained a symbol of classic Americana, never swaying from his ideals. Their feud wasn't marked by public insults or dramatic showdowns. It was a quiet, firm disagreement built on principle. Clint Eastwood was never just a rival. He was the representation of a changing world that John Wayne refused to accept. And for that reason, the Duke never let him into his circle, on screen or off. Let's tell you about another Hollywood golden boy, one John Wayne, not only hated but strongly rejected at every turn. Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg had already started to leave his mark on Hollywood by the late 1970s. With films like Jaws and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, he had quickly become one of the most promising directors of his generation. Audiences loved his work, critics praised his creativity, and studios trusted him to deliver major hits. But there was one man in Hollywood who was not impressed. That man was John Wayne. In 1979, Spielberg was working on a new project titled 1941. It was meant to be a satirical comedy set during World War II, focusing on a fictional panic in Los Angeles after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Spielberg wanted to blend historical events with slapstick comedy and over-the-top characters. It was a bold move, and he thought including a Hollywood legend like John Wayne would give the film an extra layer of appeal and credibility. So he offered Wayne a role in the movie. But instead of feeling honored or excited, Wayne was furious. He didn't just reject the role, he called the entire movie anti-American. From his point of view, turning a tragic moment in American history into a source of comedy was not just bad taste, it was offensive. He believed Spielberg was mocking the sacrifices of soldiers and civilians during a time of great national pain. Wayne saw it as an insult to the country and to the memory of those who had served and died. For Wayne, this was more than a bad script or an uninteresting role. It was a matter of principle. He had spent much of his career playing characters who fought for justice, defended freedom, and stood up for what was right. The idea of starring in a film that treated World War II as a joke went against everything he believed in. He told Spielberg directly that the movie would be a disaster and that making light of such a serious subject would offend American audiences. Spielberg, on the other hand, did not see it that way. He viewed 1941 as a different kind of war film. He believed that using humor to explore fear and paranoia was a fresh approach. In his mind, he wasn't mocking America. He was reflecting the confusion and chaos of the time through a comedic lens. Spielberg hoped that Wayne would understand his vision, and he even asked him to reconsider. But Wayne stood firm. His answer remained no. This incident became a clear example of the growing divide between old Hollywood and the new generation of filmmakers. Wayne had built his career during a time when movies often followed strict moral lines. Heroes were heroes. Villains were villains. Patriotism was never questioned. Spielberg was part of a new wave of directors who were willing to blur those lines. They told stories that were more complex, more daring, and often more critical of traditional values. Wayne did not approve of this shift. He believed movies had a duty to inspire and uplift, not challenge or confuse. His rejection of Spielberg's offer was not just a response to one film, it was a statement against the changing direction of the industry. To him, Spielberg represented a Hollywood that was moving away from honor, courage, and clear moral purpose. Although Spielberg was disappointed, he did not respond with anger. He respected Wayne's legacy and understood that their visions were fundamentally different. Still, the rejection stung. Spielberg had hoped to work with one of his childhood heroes, and instead found himself publicly dismissed by a man he admired. The film 1941 would go on to have a mixed reception. Some viewers appreciated its bold style and chaotic humor. Others agreed with Wayne and felt it lacked the respect the subject deserved. Either way, it remained a point of separation between Spielberg's modern approach and Wayne's traditional values. The fallout from this moment lasted. Spielberg and Wayne never collaborated, and their brief interaction marked one of the final public stands Wayne would take against the changing tide of Hollywood. It symbolized a passing of the torch, even if the handoff was not smooth or friendly. Steven Spielberg would continue to rise, directing some of the most beloved films of all time. John Wayne remained a towering figure of classic American cinema, unshaken in his beliefs. Their clash over 1941 was not just a disagreement about a script. It was a reflection of two very different worlds, one holding on to the past and one stepping boldly into the future. Then we come to a surprising name on our list, someone who was once a close friend of John Wayne, but later became someone he deeply resented: Clark Gable. Clark Gable and John Wayne were two towering names from the golden age of Hollywood. Both men represented a specific kind of masculinity, charm, and screen presence that audiences couldn't get enough of. They came from different backgrounds but found themselves running in the same circles, often attending the same events, working on nearby sets, and crossing paths in studio meetings. Over time, a strong mutual respect developed between them. In the early years of their careers, Wayne looked up to Gable as an established star. Gable had already made his mark with films like Gone with the Wind, and was known for his polished performances and gentlemanly style. Wayne, still carving out his path, admired Gable's presence and work ethic. As Wayne's fame grew, the two men found more common ground. They developed a friendship that went beyond professional courtesy. They spent time together off-set, occasionally socialized with mutual friends, and even discussed future projects. For a while, it seemed like they were part of the same inner circle. Their bond was strengthened by the fact that they were both part of a generation that valued hard work, loyalty, and a strong sense of identity. Gable, with his refined yet tough demeanor, and Wayne, with his no-nonsense persona, represented two different shades of the same Hollywood archetype. They respected each other's approach to acting, even if their styles were a bit different. While Gable took pride in his classical training and saw himself as a serious artist, Wayne was more instinctive, relying on presence and authenticity rather than dramatic technique. Still, this difference never got in the way of their friendship, until something happened that changed everything. The turning point came during the filming of Mogambo, a dramatic adventure film set in Africa. Gable had a prominent role, and the film was directed by John Ford, one of the most respected directors in Hollywood and a longtime friend and mentor to John Wayne. Ford was known for his demanding style and for pushing actors to their limits. He had a reputation for being tough, opinionated, and not always easy to work with. During the production of Mogambo, tensions began to rise on set. Gable took issue with Ford's behavior. He felt the director was mistreating the cast and crew and creating unnecessary conflict. Gable, never one to remain silent, began openly criticizing Ford's direction and the way he handled the shoot. He shared his complaints not just among the crew, but also in interviews and conversations outside the set. His frustrations were real, and he believed he was standing up for fairness and professionalism. But for John Wayne, these comments struck a nerve. Ford was more than a director to him. He was a close personal friend, someone who had helped shape Wayne's career and guided him through some of his biggest roles. When Wayne heard about Gable's criticisms, he was furious. He saw them as a betrayal, not just of Ford, but of the kind of loyalty Wayne valued above all else. Wayne publicly and privately defended Ford, telling those around him that Gable had crossed a line. In his view, airing grievances about a director like Ford was disrespectful, especially coming from someone who had once been a trusted friend. For Wayne, loyalty to his inner circle mattered more than anything. No matter how close he had once been to Gable, he chose to stand by Ford. The fallout was quick and final. Gable was stunned by Wayne's response. He felt that his complaints had been justified and was hurt that Wayne had turned against him so decisively. On the other side, Wayne felt betrayed by Gable's willingness to criticize someone he considered family. The two men never worked together again. Their friendship, once easy and respectful, faded into silence. They stopped attending events together and never again spoke of collaboration. Hollywood can be a place of fast friendships and even faster fallouts. But this particular one stood out because of the stature of the people involved. Clark Gable and John Wayne were not just stars, they were symbols of an era. Their breakup was more than personal. It reflected deeper differences in values, in approach, and in loyalty. For Wayne, the moment Gable attacked Ford, he became an outsider, and from that point on, the Duke never looked back. Then comes another big name, someone with whom Wayne had a feud that quickly spiraled out of control. Frank Sinatra. When you think of classic Hollywood, two names that instantly come to mind are Frank Sinatra and John Wayne. One was the king of cool, known for his silky voice, sharp suits, and larger-than-life personality. The other was the all-American cowboy, famous for his rugged roles, firm values, and commanding presence. They came from very different worlds, but in the 1960s, those worlds collided in a dramatic way that turned into one of the most talked-about showdowns in celebrity history. It all started in Las Vegas, a city both men frequented for very different reasons. Frank Sinatra loved Las Vegas. It was practically his second home. He performed there often, partied with friends, and enjoyed the energy of the nightlife. John Wayne, on the other hand, happened to be staying in Las Vegas while working on a film. He was staying in the room directly above Sinatra's in a hotel that was known for catering to stars. On one particular night, Wayne was trying to get some rest after a long day on set. But Sinatra and his crew were having one of their famous late-night gatherings. Music, laughter, and the buzz of celebration filled the hallway and echoed through the floors. At first, Wayne tried to ignore it, but as the noise went on and on, his patience began to wear thin. Eventually, he picked up the phone and called down to Sinatra's room to ask them to keep the noise down. That polite request didn't go very far. The noise continued almost immediately. Not one to be brushed off, Wayne decided to take matters into his own hands. He stormed down to Sinatra's room and banged on the door. When one of the party guests opened it, Wayne demanded to speak to Frank directly. He wasn't yelling, but his tone was firm. This was not a request. It was a demand. Standing in his way were Sinatra's bodyguards, large men who didn't take kindly to someone telling their boss what to do. One of them warned Wayne to back off and told him that nobody talked to Frank like that. But Wayne was not intimidated. In a moment that has since become legendary, Wayne responded by backhanding one of the bodyguards. The room went silent. Everyone knew this had just gone from a complaint to a full-on confrontation. Surprisingly, the situation didn't escalate further that night. Whether out of shock or respect, the bodyguards stepped aside, and the noise eventually stopped. Wayne returned to his room, and according to those who were there, he slept peacefully for the rest of the night. The incident quickly spread through Hollywood circles. It was bold, unexpected, and pure John Wayne. But what happened next is what made the story even more remarkable. Despite the tension that night, Wayne and Sinatra didn't remain enemies. In fact, they eventually reconciled and went on to become good friends. Their bond was surprising to many who saw them as polar opposites. Wayne was a traditional conservative, quiet, and focused on values like discipline and honor. Sinatra was a liberal entertainer who loved the spotlight, the parties, and the excitement of the entertainment world. Yet somehow, their differences didn't matter. Perhaps it was mutual respect. Both men had risen to the top of their fields. Both understood what it meant to carry the weight of fame. And both, despite their public images, were deeply loyal to their close friends. In time, they found that they had more in common than they initially thought. Years later, when John Wayne was diagnosed with stomach cancer, Sinatra and his wife made an effort to visit him in the hospital. They stayed by his side for days, offering support and comfort. It was a gesture that showed how far their relationship had come from that wild night in Vegas. What began as a hotel confrontation over noise ended in a deep and genuine friendship. Then came the person Wayne had a clash with, not over roles or egos, but because of their very different political views. Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando was never afraid to speak his mind. He was known not just for his powerful performances on screen, but also for using his platform to speak out about social and political issues. Throughout his career, Brando supported a wide range of causes, and his passion for activism was almost as well known as his acting talent. But one moment in 1973 would not only shock Hollywood, it would also ignite the fury of someone who stood on the opposite end of the political spectrum. That person was John Wayne. The moment came during the 45th Academy Awards. Brando had been nominated and won the Oscar for Best Actor for his role in The Godfather, one of the most iconic performances in film history. But instead of attending the ceremony to accept the award, Brando made a bold and controversial decision. He sent a young Native American woman named Sachin Littlefeather to the stage in his place. When his name was announced as the winner, Littlefeather walked on stage in full Apache dress. She declined the award on Brando's behalf and delivered a short speech explaining that Brando was refusing the Oscar to protest Hollywood's portrayal of Native Americans in film and television. She also referenced the recent events at Wounded Knee, where a standoff between federal agents and Native American activists had made national headlines. The audience was stunned. Some applauded, others booed. What was meant to be a celebration quickly turned into a tense moment filled with political weight. It was a speech that forced Hollywood to confront a long history of stereotypical and harmful depictions. But while some saw Brando's protest as brave and necessary, John Wayne saw it as something very different. Wayne was sitting backstage at the time of the speech. According to several accounts, he was absolutely furious. He believed that the Academy Awards were not the place for political statements, especially ones that, in his eyes, criticized the very industry he loved. For Wayne, who had spent much of his career starring in westerns that often featured Native Americans as the enemy, Brando's actions were deeply offensive. Eyewitnesses claimed that Wayne became so enraged during Littlefeather's speech that he attempted to charge the stage. Security and several staff members had to physically restrain him. It was later said that he had to be held back by multiple people to prevent a very public and possibly violent outburst. Though the incident never turned into a physical altercation, the story quickly spread and became part of Oscar legend. At the heart of Wayne's anger was a deep clash of values. Brando was a liberal and a progressive, someone who used his celebrity to push for civil rights, racial justice, and social change. Wayne was the opposite. He was a proud conservative who believed in traditional American values. He had long supported a patriotic image of America and had no patience for those who he believed were trying to tear that image down. Brando's protest was more than a political statement. It was, to Wayne, a personal attack on the ideals he had built his career on. Wayne had always portrayed himself as the defender of American history and culture. He viewed the Western genre as a tribute to the country's frontier spirit. So, when Brando criticized Hollywood's portrayal of Native Americans, Wayne took it as an attack on something sacred. The two men never had a personal feud in the traditional sense. They didn't work together, and there are no reports of direct confrontations after the Oscar incident. But from that moment on, Brando was seen by Wayne as someone who had crossed a line. The difference in their beliefs was too wide, the moment too public, and the emotions too strong. Brando, for his part, never apologized for the protest. He continued to speak out on issues he cared about and remained an outspoken figure for the rest of his life. He believed that silence was complicity and that artists had a responsibility to use their influence for good. Wayne, meanwhile, stayed committed to his views. He believed Hollywood should focus on entertainment, not politics. He continued to speak out in defense of traditional values and never wavered in his opinion about what happened that night. Apart from these major feuds, Wayne had issues with many others simply because of his strongly contrasting political views. The cultural divide. The cultural divide, as the political and cultural landscape of America began to shift in the 1970s, John Wayne found himself at odds with a world he no longer recognized. His conservative ideals clashed violently with emerging trends in both global politics and Hollywood storytelling. Two particular examples stand out as clear signs of this divide. The first involved President Richard Nixon's historic decision to open diplomatic relations with China. Wayne was furious over this move. He believed that engaging with a communist regime was a betrayal of American strength and values. According to reports, Wayne went so far as to send Nixon reading materials attacking Henry Kissinger, who had played a central role in arranging the China visit. In those documents, Wayne referred to Kissinger in a derogatory way, highlighting his distrust not only of the diplomacy itself, but also of the people behind it. To Wayne, this was not progress. It was surrender. Meanwhile, Hollywood was undergoing its own transformation. Films like Midnight Cowboy and Easy Rider were breaking away from traditional storytelling and exploring more controversial and complex subjects. These movies were raw, rebellious, and unfiltered. To younger audiences, they were a breath of fresh air. To John Wayne, they were a threat. He labeled such films perverted and un-American, believing they glorified immorality and undermined the values that had once made American cinema great. Wayne's criticism was not aimed at individual actors or directors. His frustration was with the broader cultural direction. These films, and the ideas they represented, stood in stark contrast to the world Wayne had come to symbolize. The divide was clear. Hollywood was moving on, and John Wayne was not willing to follow. Which feud surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories.